There are people in this world who walk willingly into the darkest places imaginable, not because they don't feel the weight of it or they're not aware of the consequences, but because they have decided the weight is worth carrying. And then there's a question that very few people really ask those people, that what does that really do to you? How do you stay grounded when what you're witnessing would break most of us? And how do you lead and decide and function under that kind of pressure without losing yourself in the process? So today's conversation is exactly about that. Welcome back to another episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host, Sayan, and I'm grateful that you're here with us today. And this is a space for these kind of honest and grounded conversations about what it really takes to live and lead from a place of genuine well-being. My guest today is Paul Hutchinson, founder of the Child Liberation Foundation and Liberating Humanity, executive producer of the 2023 film Sound of Freedom, and someone who has led over 70 undercover rescue missions from 15 countries to help free children from trafficking. Paul's story is one of the extraordinary courage, but what we are here to talk about today goes deeper than all of those missions. We're talking about the inner work and how he has carried that emotional weight of what he's witnessed. So, Paul, I welcome you to the show. Thanks for being here, and I think this is going to be a great one.
Thank you, Sayan. And it's an honor to be here with you in the audience, and I'm excited to share things that I believe can truly impact people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, I love having conversations like these and would love to, start with maybe a little bit of your story. But just before we begin with that, folks, a little disclaimer for all the listeners.
Hey, dear listeners, before we begin, a quick note from Healthy Man Payavik. This episode is created for educational and informational purposes only. The views shared by our guests are their own and may not reflect those of the host or network. Nothing in this conversation should be taken as medical, legal, financial, or professional advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making important decisions. We encourage you to listen with curiosity, think independently, and use this content as a starting point for reflection, not a substitute for professional guidance. Now, settle in and enjoy the conversation.
So, Paul, before we go anywhere else, I want to start at the very beginning of, your story. So, you began your career as an entrepreneur and investor. Nothing in that background would have, prepared you for what came next. So, can you really take us back to the moment that this work first found you? What was it that made you say yes to something so far outside of the life that you had imagined? And what was that moment like for you?
And Sayan, I believe it goes way back to my schooling years. I was asked to be the president of something called the peer leadership team in high school, where we were helping children with peers with drug and alcohol abuse and violence in the home, and a lot of challenges where if they went to a teacher and talked about it, they had to take it to an authority. And a lot of them weren't comfortable talking to an adult. But so I was trained in how to be a peer counselor. And in that space, I recognized how dark the world is for some people, especially kids, that they'll hold a lot of this pain inside. Sadly, somebody who was abused sexually in their childhood years, the average age of somebody talking about it is 52 years old. Most people hold on to that pain. They hold it their entire lifetime, and in doing so, it comes out. It comes out in anger issues and addictions and anxiety and depression and PTSD and all of these challenges. And so in my early 20s, I actually started a company that helped people through these things. I started a company that I owned a company called Midwest Center Marketing, which we had 50,000 people a month calling in off of an infomercial to get an audio program and workbooks and tools to help them overcome anxiety and depression. And because of the fact that so many people throughout the world are dealing with debilitating challenges in this space, the company did very well. I was very blessed with that company, and I sold it at 29 years old for a lot of money, many, many millions of dollars. And I invested that into real estate. I'm the founder of an investment firm that grew very, very large. In fact, when I retired, we had over 4,000 employees in our company and billions of dollars under management. But my passion was always in helping humanity, not just building apartment complexes, but my passion was back to where I built my first company and helping people overcome some of these challenges. Well, I also was very involved with a lot of charity work, particularly child-related charities. I was on the Make-A-Wish board of directors for 7 years, and I was the incoming chairman for our region in Make-A-Wish when I received a phone call from our attorney general at the time. And he said, "Paul, I know you're very involved with child-related charities. I need to talk to you about something that's pretty dark. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and good people don't know that it's happening." And he talked about human trafficking and then about child trafficking. And he spoke about a team that was in Colombia at the time that had identified some children that were being sold for the unthinkable, for organ harvesting and sex trafficking. And they needed some money to help fulfill this mission. And so I helped to make that happen. But then I received a phone call 2 weeks later that changed everything for me. It was one of the operators. He said, "Paul, I'm here in Cartagena. There's not just 20 children here that we found. There's more than 50 that are being trafficked in this one network. And there's more than 100 in surrounding cities down here that we could rescue them all on the same day, but I need your help." And I said, "Well, how much do you need?" I thought, he needed a bigger check. He said, "I need you. Can you be in Colombia in 2 days?" And Sayan, that was the beginning of something that would completely change my life. In the beginning, it changed it for the worse. I saw firsthand the darkest parts of humanity, things that we can't even discuss here. Children that were in horrible situations and being sold. And it woke me up to how difficult things can be, not just, abuse in the home, which is horrible, but sold human beings. And I at that point, the defining moment for me was when I was sitting on a chair, just like you and I right now, sitting down. These traffickers had brought out a child. They brought out four kids. All of them touted as, as new inventory they had of virgins. And there was a little boy that was 11. There was 3 little girls. One of the little girls, if somebody has seen the movie Sound of Freedom, we highlighted her as the one that we were trying to help rescue. They had showed me a picture of her before, and she was 11. And standing up, she wasn't much taller than I was as I was sitting down. And I could see into her soul. All I could see was fear. And I made a commitment right then to myself, to God, to that child, that I was going to do everything I could to eradicate that evil from the face of the earth. And so from that point, I led more than 70 undercover child rescue missions over a period of 10 years. I completely retired from my company. Now I have a certain set of skills from a previous life that makes me somewhat safe in a dangerous place. But the truth is, the reason I was effective in that space is because I had built a financial empire where one of the operators said, he told me about like Epstein and said, there's a lot of guys out there with big egos and big checkbooks that kind of think that they're above the law, above everything. And these guys are fueling a lot of these trafficking networks. And he says, if you're willing to be the bait, this will change your whole life. And indeed it did. It took me into the darkest places of the world. And sadly, we also were losing undercover operators. I had Green Berets with 300 missions in Afghanistan that already had PTSD. And one mission with us, seeing a menu with children's faces and prices of things they could pay for, it just would send their PTSD over the top. And so that's when we realized that there was a need for deeper healing for our operators, deeper healing for adults who deal with their own childhood trauma, deeper healing even for, we realized that the traffickers, many of them were trafficked themselves as children. And how do we stop this cycle of hurt people hurting other people? And so that's kind of the beginning of how it all started and how I was brought into that world.
Wow, I mean, this is something that you don't get to hear every day, all right? And let me be honest with that, Paul. And actually, before we jump to the healing side of conversations, Paul, I want to ask you something um, that maybe does not align with today's topic of this conversation. Is And I know this because I've read, a lot of you know news coming out from the media, but obviously I don't have a way to verify it. Is that uh, Paul? Did you feel scared yourself for some time, perhaps, when you got to know what you were witnessing? I mean, if you could tell about that to the world. As we know that there are a lot of whistleblowers who did, risk their lives. Telling. Epstein files is a separate conversation on its own. But I'm curious to know, how did you really react, and was there any this feeling of being paranoid over what you were seeing? And I could only imagine that, initially it was something that you could not believe, in that very moment. So how did that really feel for you? And, what made you really chase that, knowing that it could risk your life?
I'll answer it like this. One of my missions, I was in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And Port-au-Prince is the most dangerous city on the planet right now and has been for quite a while. And were pursuing a trafficking ring that eventually took down 4 federal judges as part of the operation. And it was getting very dangerous. And I had a new team. I hadn't worked with these guys before, and we were about 2 in the morning in Patienville, just outside of Port-au-Prince, and we hadn't found any connections. And I said, "Guys, can I take lead? Are you good with that?" And they said, "Yeah, we've heard you're really good at this." I said, "Okay, I need to start with a couple things, just so you understand." I said, "First of all, um, this isn't a religious conversation, but I said, I believe in God. Most people believe in a supreme being. Some people call it the universe or Heavenly Father or what it doesn't matter. There's a higher power that's very interested in us doing good and knows exactly where these children are. So if you're okay with it, or even if you're not, I'm going to start out by asking for some help." So I get out and I'm writing a book called Are You Listening? With my hand on my heart, not my hand on my ear, but hand on my heart. And a lot of times it's a matter of getting out of our heads and into our heart space to receive pure guidance in our life. And so, and I teach meditation classes and things like that for people to really tune into that clear direction. Then I said, "Guys, now I need you to understand how I see fear and faith." Most people think that faith is, going to church and asking God to fix things that they don't even believe are going to be fixed. That's not faith. That's blind hope. The fear and faith cannot exist in the same person at the same time. And faith is simply the unwavering conviction that what I want to have happen will happen because it's in line with what needs to happen. And that's exactly what. So I said, the reason fear and faith can't exist together is that in some way they're the same power. People who believe that bad things will happen to them attract that to them. People who believe that good things happen actually attract that to them. And I said, I feel safer right here, 2 a.m., downtown Port-au-Prince, Haiti, than I do, in the darkest, most voodoo-infested place on the planet than I do sitting in my office in the US. Why? Because I believe that what we are doing is fully in line with what needs to happen to fight this darkness. And you can call that whatever you want to call it. There's a this is a spiritual war. This is more than just punching guys in the face. This is fighting the deepest evil that you can imagine, selling the innocence of children. There's nothing more evil than that. And so there's nothing more powerful than the light that will fight that.
Yeah, I think I can feel what you're saying, Paul. So, I mean, is it true that, this whole race, I mean, when I say race, I really mean this, system or the propaganda that's really spread around trafficking is purely based on something that I was reading recently when the Epstein files came out was on this substance called adrenochrome, and that it helps in reverse aging. Now, is that something that you're aware of? And if you could share maybe some of these things that you don't get to hear often, I would say. So, what do you think? I mean, why is this even such a big business? I would say, right, for so many of these evil people out there, and what drives them, to do these kind of evil activities, Paul?
Here's what I found. In the beginning, I thought the traffickers would have earrings in their noses and tattoos down their necks. The first trafficker I met was a businessman. The second I met was a beautiful woman that was running a fake modeling agency. And I thought these aren't traffickers, but over time in conversations with them, absolutely, they were doing the most vile acts and making a lot of money in doing so. And over time, I recognized that the common thread over the next 10 years of doing this work, the common thread wasn't earrings and their noses and tattoos. The common thread was arrogance and greed and lust and unhealed trauma from their own past, hurt people hurting other people, combined with the arrogance and the greed and the lust and the disconnection from their moral foundations. And I saw it everywhere. And indeed, this is why I worked so well in that undercover space, is because of the fact that I had a degree of success that in a way I could look in the mirror myself and see arrogance and greed and lust. I could. I mean, I had a lot of cars. I had 2 helicopters. I had all kinds of crap that made me feel good about my ego. And in that energy, that's the kind of people who end up hurting other people if they're not careful, because they come into this degree of arrogance where they see another human being as an object. And this doesn't just start in Mexico in a dark alley. This starts in the boardroom. This starts in our homes. Yeah. The very second that we look at another person as less than ourselves because of the color of their skin, because of their religious background, because of their finances, because of their gender, it doesn't matter. The very second that we see another human being as less than the divinity that they are, we start sharing in this frequency, this energy that contributes to the abuse of children and trafficking, et cetera. And so, and answer to your question, yes, that darkness exists. It is worse than people can imagine. And, I don't want this whole clip to be cut, so I'm not going to talk about it in detail. But the truth is, yes, there are people involved very high level in Hollywood, in politics, in big corporations, very much involved in very actively choosing to be involved in rituals that are very, very dark. And so we need to be aware of that. We need to be aware that, we need to be careful who we're supporting politically and business-wise and Hollywood-wise, et cetera. But at the same time, that the biggest danger for our children, for our own children, is actually not standing behind a dark alleyway. The biggest danger for our children is in our back pockets or in their backpacks. It's their phones, it's their access to the internet, and predators everywhere are preying upon kids. And that's a whole other episode by itself. But, there's a lot we can dig down on here. But, this episode is all about, mental health and healing and everything else. But yes, the darkness exists. I will verify that.
I mean, Paul, I'm glad that you brought that up because I think you're right. It's kind of like a rabbit hole. The deeper you go, the more things you realize there are, right, that you didn't know. Like you said, I mean, I'm quite surprised the way you maybe described how I mean, physically a trafficker would look, and I'm actually surprised when you define them because it really speaks a lot about I mean, of what kind of a programmed world that I would say that we are living in right now. And I think that's a separate conversation, like you said. I mean, it's that's propaganda pretty much everywhere on social media. I mean, media. I mean, wherever you look, right? And that's a separate conversation. But Paul, one thing that I think I would like the listeners also to walk away from this conversation is staying whole while serving others is something that leaders or caregivers or parents and advocates really struggle with everywhere. Um, because there's a point wherein the more you give, the more you can lose yourself if you're not tending to your own inner life. So if you could perhaps share for someone who's listening right now who is carrying something heavy, maybe with their own unprocessed pain, maybe the exhaustion of showing up for others for a long time without that space to breathe, what would you really want to offer them, if I mean, if healing to them sounds not so possible for them at the moment?
We talk about this a lot with, on the Liberating Humanity website has a lot of information on not only keeping your children safe and helping them uh, break through and heal from some challenges they may be having, but most importantly, us as adults. I realized over 10 years that fixing this problem was never going to happen just pulling children out of hell. We needed to pull the hell out of humanity. And that's not just the guys who are, addicted to hardcore pornography or abusing their spouses, or even those who are engaging in prostitution, whatever. It's not just that. It's all of us. Every single one of us need to look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to heal so that I can show up and be more present for my children, so I can be more present for my spouse? What things do I need to let go of that don't serve me anymore? And there's many ways to do that. I teach a lot of meditative practices, everything from somatic release to couples therapy, breath work and eye gazing exercises, and I have a lot of different ones that we use at our retreats. We have retreats in throughout the world that we host. And let me touch on something that I think is important, primarily because the laws are going to change over the next year or two in the United States and thus in other countries as well when it comes to some of the tools that are very effective. So it's important that adults understand what works and what doesn't work and open your minds to the proper use of these tools. So as I spoke about a little bit earlier, and 35 years ago, my company helped people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, childhood trauma. As we dealt with the darkest part of humanity, and we had to figure out how to help our undercover operators heal from that, because they were carrying so much darkness, it was affecting every part of their life. We started working with some scientists and some doctors on the proper protocol for the use of certain psychedelics when it comes to trauma therapy, especially PTSD and addictions and anxiety and depression. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. I am when I say psychedelics, I'm talking about things like psilocybin and mushrooms, etc. Right? We have very effectively worked with veterans and also women who have dealt with severe childhood trauma, as well as entrepreneurs using everything from ketamine to ayahuasca to psilocybin all the way to iboga. And I would encourage people to take some time and do some research on the Johns Hopkins University studies on how effective these tools can be. I'm not a fan whatsoever of somebody going to a rave party and getting high with their friends on mushrooms. It's not only a bad idea, it could be dangerous. And this is why. Now, I'm going to touch on this just give me 30 seconds here on this. First of all, I thought in the beginning these things must be bad, like cocaine. You must be addictive. The truth is, psilocybin is safer than table sugar. There has never been a case of addiction, not one ever. There's never been a case of overdose, not one ever. And so people are like, wow, why was it a Schedule I drug? Well, I truly believe that it was pressure from the pharmaceutical companies, because you can get 10 and 20 years worth of therapy done in 2 or 3 days. We can help people get off of all of their anxiety, depression medications, all of those things. We have a very successful track record, and we became master facilitators about 10 years ago, primarily in helping everybody from the darkness of child trafficking. But since that time, have now hosted and facilitated almost 100 guided meditation, breath work, facilitated plant medicine healing experiences. So I'm not going to go into more detail on that here. If people can go to Liberating Humanity and learn more about that, or even in the book, The Sound of Freedom, that the true stories that inspired the film, available on Amazon, is talks the very last section talks about all of the different modalities to help people heal from childhood trauma that a lot of us still hold on to. So there's a lot of tools. I'm a big advocate of breath work. I'm a big advocate of daily meditation, and a lot of people, I know in the beginning, me as a non-denominational Christian, I thought, oh, meditation, that's different. That's opposite of prayer, right? No, that's Eastern versus Western. No, here's how I see it. For me, at least, prayer was very one-sided. It was, God, sorry, praise, fix, and then hang up the phones, so to speak. I never took the time to listen, never took the time to tune in. And deep meditation is simply getting out of your head, getting into your heart, and being able to receive instead of just having that one-sided conversation with your creator. So that's a whole long conversation there, but it's a key to healing is in getting into that heart space and tuning into that light that all of us have access to.
Wow, I think that's a very important message that you shared towards the end, Paul. And I think would love to have another conversation on the other side of this, of what we talked about, perhaps. But folks, for today, since we near the minute mark, I would want to remind you that what Paul reminded me today is this. I think when you say resilience, it's not the absence of any kind, of being affected, right? It is the practice of choosing right again and again, and to process what you carry rather than really ignore or bury it. So that's the thought that I would like you all to sit with and ponder about for a few minutes as we wrap this up. But Paul, for this conversation, if someone resonated with and has been thinking about these stuff lately and wants to connect with you, could you please tell our listeners where can they find you, your book, and the work of Liberating Humanity so that they can continue this journey with you?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. And all social medias, you can just look up Liberating Humanity and you can find me on the social media channels, and or you can just go to liberatinghumanity.com. And if you want to get directly involved with our foundation, you can just go to Child Liberation Foundation, or there's links on Liberating Humanity as well that will link you into the foundation. So would be honored to connect with anybody. If somebody wants to spend some one-on-one time, come down to one of our retreats. And I would be honored to spend time in that sacred space and helping people release everything that doesn't align with them and embrace everything that they want to achieve in their life.
Lovely. And folks, for all of you, I'll include the details in the show notes so that you could easily reach out to Paul and also dig deeper into the book, Sound of Freedom. And folks, with that, we hit today's minute mark on this podcast. So thank you so much, Paul, for this conversation. This is not something, I think this was one of a kind and something that you don't get to talk about every day. And I just want to thank you for sharing your honest views and a grounded, reality on what's really going on around the world. So to everyone who listened today, folks, thank you for being here, willing to sit with something, a difficult conversation like this. And I just want to remind you that Healthy Mind, Healthy Life believes that these kind of conversations are part of healing too. So if today's episode touched something in you, please do share it with someone who might need it. And this has been Sign on Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, part of the Healthy Mind Biovic Network. And we'll see you in the next one.